morning, you guys. Happy Monday. I'm trying to be as energetic and perky as I possibly can, but I'm tired, so I'm going to do the best I can right now. We had a really amazing clinic yesterday, and I'm calling them the mirror workshops, and it was a little bit of an experiment because the people that I had join yesterday are all people that I've worked with. So I like to try out different things within clinics with them because they're doing enough of the work where they can really give me good feedback. And yesterday was really cool. I've never done a clinic like that or a workshop. It was all groundwork, and I think we had 6 or 7 horses out there. And really leaning into the idea that we can utilize them as a very non-judgmental, very present mirror to what's going on for us. They tend to trudge up a lot of different thoughts and perceptions and things that maybe we wouldn't normally think about if we were just doing life. There's this really amazing book that I'm reading for like the 4th time in a week, and it's called I Am Enough, and I think there's like 700 of those books. This one is very different. It's by Panache Desai, and I'll put the link for it in this call, but he really talks about every single situation, every single person. He doesn't talk about horses, but I do. So every horse that comes into your life is just a reflection of something that you need to, that you probably need to heal. So what does that look like? Yesterday, the first thing that I did with everybody was we just go through a meditation. We had the talk without the horses first, and I wanted them to get very intentional about every thought they thought while they were getting ready. Everything they said about themselves or their horse. Every conversation they had in the barn. It was really quiet in there. I think people were really concentrating and trying to be mindful of what they were saying. So I don't know how effective that was or not. I know that they got a lot more focused on their horses and those connections, and they were much more present. I always invite people to hear what they say about their horse when they talk about them to other people. Hear what you hear when you describe people in your life. Hear what you hear when you describe your job, your situations. There's usually an underlying theme, and it's, if it is perceived as negative, then it's most likely something that is being highlighted for you to take, to use, to heal. Operating under the idea that you're born whole, that when you're a child, there are no wrong or right emotions, that you literally just go from one emotion to the next, and you never have to feel right or wrong about it until somebody tells you that that emotion is right or wrong. I'm always talking about the nervous systems, talking about the cortisol, talking about the adrenaline that gets released into your body. If it's not used, it's stored. It creates resistance. It creates disease. It creates chronic illness. And one of the ways that you release that stuckness, that density in your body, is by noise, or not noise, well, I guess it's kind of noise, sound and movement. So when you think about a little kid who's too young to have been conditioned into your feelings are right or wrong, they just run around and they scream and they fall down on the ground when they're upset, and they make weird sounds, and you have to wonder why. They're born inherently not giving a shit what other people think. They're born knowing exactly how to self-care, how to release that stuff within them. And until we as adults that have been conditioned on an ancestral level, generation to generation, that these things are weird or wrong, or you shouldn't feel this way, or you should feel that way, generations and generations, because that's just passed down. You're so far away from who you actually are when you're born till you get to, teenage years and then into adulthood, that really I believe what life is here to do is to restore you back to who you were born and who you were when you were born. And what the gift of the universe gives us is situations, scenarios, people into our lives to help highlight those wounds so that we can actually feel the emotion that we suppressed and filter all the way through it so we can release it. So what does that look like? It looks like not making any emotions that you feel wrong. So when sadness shows up and you feel like, well, this has been long enough, I shouldn't still feel this way, you judge yourself and then you look away from it or you suppress it instead of just leaning into it and moving all the way through it to the other side. We block ourselves because we've been conditioned to think that there's a time limit on grieving, there's a time limit on anger, there's a time limit on hurt. Any of those things can pop up. And really it kind of circles back to the only way that you can fill in those things is if you just allow it and not make it wrong and not judge yourself for it. And so that's really what we had talked about. Within the workshop, we traded horses probably every, 10, 15 minutes and let people experience what they were going to experience and process it in a safe environment. And what I do with the horses is that I take them into situations that's going to create that stress response, and I stay with them and I hold space until they can switch nervous systems over and kind of rewrite that story about what that is. And so I wanted to do the same thing for the people in the workshop. I wanted to be able to create a situation where they're working someone else's horse, they're working a horse that they haven't worked, there's a trainer there watching, all the things that would elicit a little bit at some level that sensation of I'm not enoughness or the judgment that we have on ourselves, and give them an opportunity to say it out loud and feel the feelings all the way through to the other side. Then also bringing in a mantra that reminded you that you could be in a place of non-judgment with yourself, so that when you went into the real world and you started to experience different emotions that you were experiencing, you could remember and you could tap back into that anchor of, hey, it's actually okay that I can feel this. It's not right or wrong. It just is. I'm feeling this because I'm supposed to. I'm feeling this because at one point in my life I felt this and it wasn't allowed to move all the way through me and be fully experienced and expressed. And so I've been holding on to it. So that's really what I wanted to create. And I think I'm going to do more of those workshops because I think that there's something really valuable within it. But what we were here to talk about today was trust. And I really always like to call on the Brene Brown. She does the anatomy of trust, and she uses an acronym, which is BRAVING. I use this acronym when I work with the horses in the round pen with people. Not just in the round pen, but it's usually where I start with people. And it's really to identify how they actually feel about the different parts of that acronym. Because I have a firm belief that the horses and all the cues we give them, they are what they are, but really what they're really reading off of is how you feel about that stuff and your intention behind it. So we had a call with a chiropractor vet this morning, and she spoke to the way that hormones work and the way that our pheromones are passed on to people within our range. And a lot of people think that your hormones are just trapped within your skin, and then really recognizing that they exude through your pores, through your breath, through your entire field. So when you come close and in contact with somebody else, that's what they're picking up on. So that's what we refer to as like intention. Some people, it's so interesting that they still want to go to that word woo-woo when it's all just science. And so when you really don't like somebody, you're going to go into that fight or flight mode at some level, and that stress mode. Those hormones are going to secrete through your body, and when you come into vicinity with that person, that's what they're actually picking up on. So they know you don't like them, not because of the words you say, or, some of it does have to do with your body language, obviously, but there is nothing you can do to mask that piece of it. So the same with the horses. So when I have somebody that I want to take through this acronym and I want to sort out the foundation of their relationship with their horses and with themselves and with everyone else, the first thing... That was interesting. Sorry, very distracted. There was like a high-pitched scream and all the horses nickered. So that's weird. Okay, just kidding. So back to the acronym. It's BRAVING. And the first piece of that is boundaries. And so that's what I take people. Actually, I'll run through the whole acronym really fast, and then I'll break down each piece really quickly, and then tie it back into why it matters how you feel about this stuff, more than actually just doing the steps of whatever you think you're supposed to be doing within working with your horse. So B is for boundaries, and boundaries being, I know I can trust somebody if I feel comfortable speaking my own boundaries, being clear on what those boundaries are, and expressing those to somebody. I can trust you when I know that you'll respect those back. The key to this is that you have to know what your own boundaries are first, and you have to know how you feel about upholding those boundaries. So I have a lot of people that will get very uncomfortable because they think, if I uphold this boundary, my belief is that people won't like me. My belief is people will think I'm mean. People will think that I'm whatever, fill in the blank of what you think a boundary is. Things that sometimes people don't even recognize. And it does not change when you work with your horse versus when you work with a person. Work with a person, interact with a person. So it is no different. So making sure that you're clear on what your boundaries are, and how you feel about upholding those boundaries is going to be step one. Because if you can't get right with that, when you go to work with your horse, it's going to be a shit show no matter what. So it's the most important one, and I think it's the one where people really, they stay there for a minute, because it's stuff sometimes you don't actually look at. And for horses, boundaries is certainty. Boundaries are safe for them. That's what they look for in each other, and it's what they look for in us. So if we're wavering in the way that we feel about our boundaries, then we have to understand that they're going to pick up on that, and we're not going to be deemed as someone safe to be around. They're going to have their guard up, and they're not actually going to fully release and get supple for us. For me, fully releasing is if they completely trust you. The reason that it carries over into your performance is because their bodies are soft. It's like going to a massage therapist, and you walk in and they're shouting at you to lay down and take your clothes off and and make you really uncomfortable, and they don't feel trustworthy. They don't feel like they're hearing you or seeing you. How soft and supple is your body going to be when they're working on you to manipulate you? So it's no different for the horses. Their physical body starts with how they feel about situations in their mind. And so if they can't trust you, that's why it's actually affecting the training. Honestly, like, there's a lot of contraptions out there that you can put on a horse to make them go into frame, but is it sustainable? No, because you're still working against tension, and working against all of that tension is going to create soreness. It's going to create imbalance in their body. It's going to create chronic pain eventually. So that's why these tools that are out there, I'm not saying I haven't used stuff along the way, and I'm not saying if they're used properly that they're wrong, but if you want an honest perception of where your horse actually is at, you should be able to get the suppleness and softness and the self-carriage in a halter, because then you actually see where their brain is. That's why I like to start in the round pen, because if there is no actual tool holding you to them, you get to see where they're actually at mentally. The second thing is reliability. So not only do you have to show up in a place where you're clear on your boundaries, you're respectful of your own boundaries, you know you can respect somebody else's, you have to show up like that consistently. So it can't just be one time. Like, you're not going to trust somebody after one time of them telling you or showing you or experiencing that from them. It has to be on a regular basis. It has to be consistent. It has to be when shit's hard. It has to be when it's easy. Like, it has to be all the time. Consistently, I do not waver. I know what they are, and I'm not going to let someone into that space to mess with that stuff. The second thing I'm looking, accountability. That's the A in braving. So the accountability portion is, when I make a mistake, do I feel comfortable owning that mistake? And can I come to you and say, wow, I actually really screwed that up, and I'm sorry. And I can see now, looking back, how that made you feel, and I can understand why I did it, and I can understand how I can shift that the next time, and I really want to apologize for making you feel any way that I might have. Knowing that you can show up like that for somebody else gives them the space to do that for you as well. If you're dealing with somebody that cannot be accountable for the stuff that they've done on a reliable, consistent basis, not just once, like, it has to be consistently, because we're human beings, we're gonna fuck up, and that's fine, but, like, own it. I'm a human being. I probably did that in a way that it shouldn't have been done. There's probably a way better way. Like, let me just own it and say I'm sorry for that. They get to decide whether or not you've done that multiple times and if they want you in their life or not. So if you're somebody that's always apologizing, it possibly is time to take a look at where your boundaries lie and what it is that's showing up repeatedly while you're always having to apologize. So not only is it owning it, it's looking deeper at it at a conscious level. I wonder what that was about, why I did that. Why did I react that way instead of consciously responding to that? You know, why did I behave that way in the first place? That's really looking at it and taking accountability. So it's not just apologizing, it's being curious about, why did I do that? Like, why did I do that? The vault. So the vault is when you tell somebody something, you know that they're going to keep that as yours and theirs without you having to say it. It's interesting that you think of it like that, and she always goes into the bigger picture of when you have somebody that shows up to you and tells stories that are not theirs to tell. So if you have a friend, you sit down with them and they're always wanting to tell you what's going on in their other friends' lives that are really private. You have to wonder, are they doing the same thing with me? You know, and that's just not your story to tell. So if you're telling their story to me, it automatically elicits a distrust within me, knowing if I share stuff with you in confidence, are you going to just willingly share it to that other friend that maybe you're sharing their story with me? So think about that. I have a lot of clients that have a lot of really amazing experiences, and they're so powerful for people to hear and for me to share. So I'll either share that story without attaching a name to it, or I'll ask them, hey, is it okay if I share that story? I feel like it would be really powerful for someone else going through something similar to you to actually hear it. So being mindful of what you share and what you don't share and how you share it is really important. Not just, hey, did you hear, you know, Susan is getting a divorce and her husband cheated on her. And it's hard because if that's how you've learned to connect with people, then you go, what do I have to go to? Am I supposed to talk about how great my life is? Because honestly, in society, that's also been made to be wrong. It means you're boasting. It means you're being prideful. It means you're bragging. I have a whole group of friends now that I get to share my wins with. And when things are going really well, like, I get to share that. And they're equally as happy for me as I am for them in the same situation. So this shifts over the last couple of years for me of learning how to, instead of hotwiring connection by shit talking, which is my total jam from before, and seeing all the stuff that I can be judgy about and connecting with people in that way, because it is really easy to connect with people in that way. It's very fast. And it was just because I didn't have anything different modeled to me growing up. And so I just didn't know there was a much better way to connect with people. Am I coming on here and saying I'm not judgy? No, because I just talked about it in my group. As I went to a country concert a couple nights ago, and we did sit up on the balcony, and like there was a couple people that looked like they weren't wearing pants, you know. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm being fully judgy right now. So I'm not perfect, and I'm not saying that, but the mindfulness piece, I'm aware of when I do that, and it's like, okay, do I really actually care if that girl looks like she's wearing pants or not? Not really. Like, I don't care what she does. It was just a kind of a thing that, you know, you notice and whatever else. So no, I'm not sitting here saying that I know how to connect with people on that level all the time. I'm totally consistent. I'm like BFFs with Buddha and we're on the same page. Like, absolutely not. But I recognize when I'm doing it. I recognize where I came from and how I was doing it before. And I understand why. So I can catch myself much faster and shift from that place, because I don't want to show up like that. So integrity, doing what you say, in moments where it's more maybe comfortable to just go with the flow and act in a way that's not aligned with your values or your boundaries, instead of going, like choosing that courage piece of, I'm not really going to do that. That's not my jam. No, I'm not going to talk shit about that person. So, you know, maybe we can talk about something else. That can be a really uncomfortable situation when you're sitting across from somebody that has connected with you in that way before. And all of a sudden you're trying to make these shifts and you're going, actually, you know, like, I don't want to have that conversation. Can we talk about something else? That would be choosing courage over comfort. the comfortable thing would just be to sit there and smile and, oh yeah, that's right, you're right, and hop on that wagon of let's talk shit. Or in any other way. It's basically knowing what your boundaries are, and when someone asks you to do something and you don't have time, or it's going to burn you out, or that it's going to frustrate you and cause resentment if you do it, but it's too uncomfortable to say that you don't want to, so you do it anyways, that would be choosing comfort over courage. So acting in integrity, mostly for yourself and for your own well-being first, and aligning with your values and aligning with the things that you're really true to who you are and what you want to bring. The non-judgment. So knowing that, this is a big one. Knowing that you can ask for help and not be judged for it. The tricky part about this is people are always so willing to help. So it always feels easier for somebody to come to you and say, hey, I really need help. And then you get to, what do you need? Like, how can I help you? And you get all of those shots of the feel goods for being able to connect with this person and help them. But when it comes to you asking for help, it puts you in a very vulnerable state. And oftentimes what people would rather do is not ask for help. And that's interesting, because if you're saying that you fully do not judge people for coming to you for help, but you yourself are not willing to ask for help, there is judgment. So I need you to hear that, because it's important. If you are saying that you're open and willing for people to come to you and ask for help, but you yourself will not ask for help, it is most likely because at some level you are judging yourself for not knowing the answer, or being afraid of what people will think. So, and that is self-judgment as well. You cannot show up for somebody in non-judgment if you're judging yourself. You can't. And you can argue with that, but you can't. So think about that. And the only way to really deeply connect with people is to become incredibly vulnerable, which is terrifying, because basically what you're saying is, I'm giving you not control, that's not the right word. I'm handing you something that means a great deal to me, and I don't have any control over what you do with it. I don't have any control over how you behave after. I have zero control over that, and that's terrifying. But the only way to really connect with somebody, if you're doing it from your true authentic self, is to show up that way and risk being hurt, or risk it not turning out like you thought it was going to. The only way. And so when we talk about that non-judgment piece, and giving people the gift of being able to help you. So going back to the vulnerability piece, it's the first thing we look for in somebody else is vulnerability. But it is the last thing that we want anybody to see from us, which is fascinating. I'll tell you that every call that I've had in my mastermind class so far, every trainer has come on and at some level been able to get very vulnerable about their process of where they've gotten, the moments where they didn't feel enough, how they help their clients when they're in that situation. And the reason that we could connect at such a deep level is because I didn't go in with an agenda. I didn't go in knowing. I just knew that if I sat in front of that computer screen and that person, and I could actively listen and really care about what they were saying, that I would be able to connect with them. And from that, they would feel safe to do the same and then share what they needed to share, because it was a safe space. So the vulnerability piece for me is, I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't have a plan. I have to just trust that if I show up who I am and am actually curious in what they're having to say, then it will work out just fine. So that's a huge level of vulnerability that I've had to step into for the last couple months, and it's been very uncomfortable, and I've had a lot of uncomfortable situations lately, but I'm learning a lot, so yay. And then the last piece is generosity. And so this is a big thing for me. It may be a blind spot for me, I'm not sure. I think actually the boundary thing is more of a blind spot for me, and I think it's the generosity piece because it's easier to say that. I'm always processing stuff when it comes out of my mouth. So I may have to circle back to that one. Generosity. What does generosity look like? It looks like always assuming the best about somebody first. So, if I call somebody or text somebody and they don't respond right away, my first assumption is always that they're busy at work, they're in the shower, they are asleep, my first assumption is pretty generous about the situation. I always think the best about people. The opposite of that would be when that text doesn't come back, or when someone is called multiple times and there's no response. Their first assumption is that that person doesn't want to talk to me, they're just ignoring me, they are they're flaking on me, they've done something different, they're with somebody else and they don't want to talk to me. When your mind races into a direction where you're not generously assuming something, the best thing of the other person. So what I need from somebody is to know who I am and know that I am honorable in the things that I say, and if I'm holding up my boundaries true to who I am, that if I don't respond right away, it is because there's actually a really good reason. And I'm not saying I'm not completely forgetful sometimes, because I know some people come on here and be like, I texted you, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I was in the middle of something and I totally spaced out. They don't make it mean that person doesn't care about me. This person doesn't want to be around me. Like, they don't go there. My real friends, the people I trust, don't go there. They assume the best about the situation. And sometimes I'm just a little dingy with the texting, okay? But they don't go straight to, she doesn't like me and doesn't want to talk to me. So that would be for me showing up generously. So if you take yourself through each of these things and say first, can I do this for myself first? Because you cannot give somebody that which you do not already have within yourself. So if you don't know what your boundaries are, you don't feel good about upholding those boundaries. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you hide who you really are. You don't show up authentically. Most of the time you show up and just try to make people comfortable instead of doing the things that is aligned with how you really feel. If you do assume the worst of people first, take yourself through this acronym first, because not only does it refer back to other relationships you have, it's going to directly affect your horse and how you feel about your horse. There is no way around that. That just is. And be easy with yourself and use grace with yourself, because honestly, there's not a lot of people looking this deep at this stuff, and you have been conditioned to think that there are right and wrong emotions. So take the right and wrong out of this situation and look at what is. And what is what do I feel about each of these things with myself first. And when you get that stuff and examine that stuff deeper, then you plug in the people in your life, plug in your horse. You remember that these horses are our mirror. So when we make shifts in our own life, the horses will shift without us doing anything. And that also goes for people in your life. I don't know what that crow squawking means, but I'm sure it means something. So just remembering that that's what that is. Every circumstance, every situation, every person that shows up is just reflecting back to you who you actually are. Most of the time, it's going to be stuff that you are needing to heal. So if you can't experience an emotion that you don't already have within you. So if you have anger within you, if there's an unhealed wound that produces anger in a situation, someone else cannot push that button in you unless it's already there. So hear that. If you are not already holding some level of anger, frustration, fear, whatever inside of you, somebody else cannot elicit that emotion from you. So when you do feel that stuff come up, look at where could that have been a space in my life that I was not allowed to fully feel that emotion until completion. You don't ever get joy and happiness and gratitude stuck in your body. Those emotions don't feel heavy. They're not dense. Because we allow those emotions. Those emotions feel good. No one says, oh my gosh, honey, you're so happy. What can we do to help you? How can we fix this emotion? But they do that with sadness, anger, and frustration. So why are we making those emotions wrong? Those emotions are there for a reason. Allow yourself permission to feel them fully. And then I want you, after you feel like it's all ran out, just relax around it. It's just a sensation in your body. It's nothing you need to run from, hide from, numb from. Don't grab your phone. Don't text a person you shouldn't text. Don't go on social media. Sit with it and go, what is this emotion about? And how can I fully feel it? And how can I just relax around it and stop pushing it away and repressing it? Just feel it. That is how you release that emotion, by learning how to relax around it. Not pushing it away, not numbing, not looking away. Look at it. Sit with it. Get comfortable with it. Have coffee with it. Why do I feel like I have so much tension restricting my chest right now? What is this about? And how can I just feel through it? It's just a sensation in your body. I think that's it. And that crow. That crow is eliciting like a little bit of irritation. And I am feeling a little bit irritated about a couple situations. So rightly so. Thank you, universe, for bringing me that crow to squawk through my live video. So I'm going to go sit with my irritation and I'm going to relax around it. And I'm going to update you guys on this process that I'm doing through the next week. And next Monday, we'll dive deeper into that stuff because, like I said, I'm on the 4th time reading this book and it's been very, very enlightening for me and having me realize a lot of things. So I'm excited to share that stuff with you. So, like always, if you guys have any comments or anything you want to say, please drop it in the comments. I'll circle back around and answer those. And I appreciate you guys spending this time with me. All right, I'll see you guys later.